So the president must turn over his taxes to the grand jury in New York unless he can come up with the same kind of arguments that any other person would be able to raise as an objection in court. So the Supreme Court sent the Vance case, the New York grand jury case, back to the lower courts, but it took away all the arguments the president made about why he is different and special, that he's absolutely immune from the criminal justice process, and that allowing local district attorneys to seek things from the president would subject the president to harassment. So what the Supreme Court says is, okay, now go back to court and make the same kind of arguments anybody else would make about why you think these subpoenas are intrusive. It puts him on the same standard, basically, in other words, as anybody else trying to block a subpoena, makes it much, much, much harder for the president to keep this material out of the hands of the grand jury in New York. On the congressional subpoena, the Supreme Court has also sent the case back. It is said the president absolutely can't say no, but it is said in a case like this, where a congressional subpoena is so broad, there's a test that the lower courts have to apply. They have to make sure that this is tethered to some legitimate legislative purpose, that it's not going to harass the president. So it's set out a series of steps that the lower courts have to look at. So bottom line here, Chuck, number one, nothing's going to get resolved in these cases until after the election, because they go back to the lower courts. Whoever loses there has a chance to appeal. It could go back to the Supreme Court. That's the first thing. Second thing, even if the New York grand jury had gotten a complete, absolute win here, that wouldn't mean that we would see the president's tax records because of the rules of grand jury secrecy. Even if the grand jury ultimately gets the president's taxes and he can't come up with any good objection for why he shouldn't turn them over, they don't become public. And the only way that we would ever see them is if there's someone indicted and goes to trial and the taxes are introduced as evidence. So those are the two bottom lines. Nothing's going to be resolved before the election. We're not going to see any of this stuff on the congressional subpoenas. You know, if the president ever did turn over any of his business records to Congress, they might ultimately become public, but it's going to be months and months and months, possibly a year, maybe two, before this is fully resolved in court. So it's a mixed day for the president. He doesn't have to do anything right now, but the idea that he can put a barricade around the White House and say, no, I don't have to respond to any of you, that's a dead letter now.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.